All right, we are live in YouTube for the Megaton Man Multimensions multimedia huge never-ending bonanza, and I'm here with Don Simpson. Don, how you doing?
Tired of hearing myself talk, Eli. I hope we have some really great guests that are
Oh, you
interesting
know
and
we do.
compelling and charismatic.
You know we do. All right, so let's take it. Let's bring in the guests. We have Kerry Callen, the amazing. We have Bill Morrison, the mystifying, and Dan Shahin, the shabanga. Welcome, guys. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
All right, perfect. Sweet. All right, Don. So what do you want to do? How do you want to go about it? Uh-oh.
See Frozen?
Frozen. Top of the charts. All right, sweet. No worries. We'll get Don back here in a second. Shout out to Joe and Chris in the chat. And let's just talk to everyone about. Oh, there's Don back. All right, there we go. I think I see you.
Well, let me start with this incredible piece of artwork. The origin of this is Bill Morrison, and he actually sent me the original. I asked Bill. We were up in Monroe at the Pop Fest, and it was kind of a slow convention, and we were just talking. And I said, "Why don't you write the intro to my Complete Megaton Man Omnibus Volume 1?" So he complied. He was more than happy to do that. And then it occurred to me, because I'm very dense, I said, "Why don't you draw a picture and do Megaton Man in the Simpson style?" And I was literally expecting like a Matt Groening from, Life in Hell, maybe
Like
a marker drawing on the back of a napkin or something, and just I would have been happy with that. But he does this incredibly beautiful piece. Not only lush line work, and look at the Jiffy Pop. I mean, that is
every kernel lovingly rendered.
And he sends me. Let me just show you this.
A worthy frontispiece.
And he sends me a color file. And it's way at the beginning here, so I'm scrolling back through the PDF. Only the Complete Megaton Man is black and white. So there was no place to put it. Or I used it in black and white. And then I'm double dipping to use the color file in Multimensions. It's the frontispiece. So as soon as you open the front cover, you get Bill Morrison. And I completely ruined his drawing by adding legs.
You did not.
So
and by the way, I sent Don my drawing, as he mentioned, and he sent me the drawing of the legs and the banana peel.
Perfect.
Yeah, and
so I said to my good friend Matt, and then I crossed it out.
I thought you did a great job, like really an amazing job of matching the style too. I mean, it's seamless.
Well,
it looks like
it's a wonderful addition to both projects. And I didn't realize they would both be coming out at the same time, but it looks like they'll be almost on top of each other. Why, Bill? Why don't you mention how do we know each other? What is your
we both attended the Center for Creative Studies in Detroit, and it's now called the College for Creative Studies, and I actually teach there now. So I followed in Don's footsteps as a teacher, and
but you were ahead of me.
I was like a year or two ahead of you, yeah.
And you actually graduated. I dropped out. I dropped out after a year.
You hung out with my friend John Adam, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And
we were roommates for a while.
John was a year or two younger than me. He went into the Navy. John's a very interesting guy. I met John through my wife, who was doing community theater with John. And so he was a good actor. He was a director as well as an artist. And we ended up going to CCS around the same time, kind of staggered. And I think that's how I met you the first time, Don, isn't it?
Yeah, the bunch of us hung out in that first floor vending machine, Pac-Man area.
Yeah. We called it the fishbowl.
There was Jim Helkowski and there was Bryant Tillman, and a bunch of us were into Nicole Robertson. A bunch of us were into heavy metal and undergrounds and Raw Magazine and so on and so forth. And but the school did not teach animation or cartooning.
No,
it was either commercial art or visual communications, whatever they called it, graphic design, so forth. And then they had fine art, and they also had industrial design. I think they had a photography, video.
Yeah, they did.
But nobody in Detroit, the commercial art market was very regional in those days, and Detroit was all automotive advertising, and nobody knew anybody that did cartooning. And I don't know if did you ever ask your teachers, why don't you guys teach cartooning, or why don't you show us how to use Indian ink and a brush and so forth?
There were a few times, and I tried my best to just like any assignment that I got that I could turn into a Spider-Man illustration, or somehow like a Bernie Wrightson homage or something like that. I did it. I just would shoehorn comics into every assignment that I possibly could. We did have an animation course. We had one class in I don't know if it was while you were there, Don, but it was really bad. It was like right now I'm teaching in the entertainment arts department, which didn't exist at CCS back then.
Yeah.
And so now it has its own building with animation and game design.
Is that at the East Kirby?
Yeah.
Or is that at the GM's, near the GM building?
No, I think the GM is mostly where the industrial design department is.
What do they call it? The art Atlas building, or the art something?
Well, I hear it referred to as the Taubman Center.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I've never been over there yet.
But they do teach graphic novels now, and they teach cartooning and
and actually I pitched a comic storytelling class to my bosses in the entertainment arts department, because the comics class that they did have was in the illustration department. And I said, look, we're entertainment arts. Why don't we have comics? Comics is entertainment. And they thought it was a great idea. And what they did was they made it available to both illustration students and animation students. So I wrote a syllabus for it, and it's kind of tailored to both disciplines. So animation students can get a lot out of it, as well as illustration students. But this animation class that I had when I was back there, it was mostly animation history, because every class they had this is like pre-video. I mean, video recorders and players existed, but you had to usually rent them. Like, they were really expensive. And I guess maybe the school couldn't afford to buy one, but they could afford to rent a 16 millimeter projector. And so every class we would watch old cartoons, and the instructor would talk about them. And he didn't really teach us that much about how to animate. And then, like, we had about a month left in the semester, and he gave us this assignment. And my animation students laugh when I tell them this. The assignment was to do 3 minutes of animation, fully finished color, like finished cell animation. Yeah.
Cell vinyl.
Yeah. And we had no idea that was impossible for one student to do. So I started drawing. I just started, like drawing this. Do you remember that Bernie Wrightson comic strip they turned into a poster called Change for $1?
No.
It's got this guy who is trying to get change for $1, and everybody ignores him on the street. Finally, this little man comes up, this little nebbish, and he says, "Change for $1?" And the guy says, "Certainly." And he changes into this monster, and he has this big hairy claw, and he just swipes it, and the guy's face and guts go flying. And
Okay, sounds familiar.
there's like this pile of goo on the sidewalk in the second to the last panel, and in the last panel, the guy turns back into the little man with the umbrella, and there's like a hand sticking up out of the goo with the dollar bill still in it, and he grabs it and says, "Thank you." There it is.
Wow.
Wow.
So I decided to animate that, and I got as far as I could, and I really had no idea how much footage I had, or how long it was going to take to run. And the way it was back then is like we had to photograph our animation on a animation stand, like a camera on a stand that's focused down on the table.
Right.
And I just photographed all my drawings and sent the film in to get developed. There was no way for me to look at it to see what it looked like until I got it back. And I had no 16 millimeter projector to look at it before class. So the first time I saw it was like the last day in class. And the instructor runs everybody's film. So he runs mine. And I'm thinking, I probably got close to 3 minutes. And it was over in 10 seconds. I just sat there going, oh my God, all that work. And
Well, Mike, one of my roommates was Mike Ghazala.
Mike.
And he had the 3-peg, he had the animation disc, the light backlit.
Yeah.
And he had paper, and he had he did a couple TV commercials for local businesses. But there used to be on West Grand Boulevard, there used to be Jam Handy, which was like a major animation, like for industrial animation. And I don't know if they were still active by the 1980s. We should probably mention, we're talking 80, 81 is when I went to CCS. But it was actually, there was actually animation in Detroit, but it was all for industrial kinds of training films and automotive advertising kind of things.
And Max Fleischer worked there.
Wow.
After Paramount got rid of him, he went into commercial advertising, and he worked at Jam Handy in Detroit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did they start teaching, liberalizing their curriculum there, including? Because I always thought it was strange. They would have, like, you would take an advertising design class, and they would have you do a Time magazine cover. And it's like they didn't know anybody that ever had done a Time magazine cover. But their argument was that, well, we don't know anybody that does cartooning except for like Draper Hill or somebody in town doing editorial cartooning. But would that have been the 90s they started to?
Probably. Yeah, 90s or 2010s. I mean, the building's fairly new. So I'd say it's probably not more than 20 years old.
Okay.
They probably had entertainment arts classes before the building, and it probably grew to the point where they said, okay, we can justify the expense of a separate building.
That's the building that they built south of, like, where the music building used to be. Music. Okay. So the next question I have is that you were editor of Mad, and I don't even know what years, but that's how you knew Kerry.
Right.
And I'm convinced the only reason Kerry wanted to work on this project was because you gave it some legitimacy and made it seem Well, I guess this is a real thing if Bill's involved and he did a cartoon.
I just
So-
love doing comics, so it's hard for me to pass up doing
Yep.
comics, especially when it's somebody known. I mean, a lot
When
of
did you? I'm gonna call up my. I'm gonna call up your story, Kerry. But when did you work with Bill?
I think it started fairly recently, 2017.
Well, yeah, I started. I was hired by DC to edit Mad in 2017. Part of that year was just spent building a new staff because the New York staff, except for one guy, they all refused to move. Um, so they were out of jobs, and I had to hire a whole new staff. So I think I know Kerry, you were in the first new issue, right?
I was.
Yeah. So I talked to my editors once I hired them, and I said, have you guys seen this comic strip that's online that's called what's it called? Kerry Super Graphics?
Super Antics.
Super Antics. I'm thinking of Steranko. I always get you mixed up with Steranko.
Oh yeah, people do all the time.
Yeah, so I said, have you guys seen Super Antics? And some of them had, but I said, let's find as many as we can, because I think we should, we're talking about bringing in new people who have that Mad aesthetic and vibe, and I think Kerry would be perfect. So all my editors looked at your work, and they were all on board. So we had you kind of retool one of your famous Superman images, I think, for the first one. What we did was we had a comic section in the magazine because DC wanted us to develop intellectual property for Mad, because all they had was Spy versus Spy and Alfred E. Newman. Those were the only two IP entities that they had. And they said, so we want to develop, more characters. And I thought, well, rather than have that kind of, if it didn't work out, I didn't want it to be like dominating the magazine. So I said, why don't we have a section within the magazine that's all comics? It's kind of like almost like an insert, like a comic book insert. And if things aren't really working, we can rotate out strips that aren't working and rotate in new ones. So Kerry's Superman image was on the cover of the first one. We called it Patrazibi Comics. So we were trying really hard to like reinvigorate and reimagine Mad, but also harken back to the early days. And I don't know if I ever said this to you, Kerry, but I did a number of interviews at the time, and people were like, well, what can we expect? And I said, well, they basically told me, we want to bring in a new audience. We want women to read Mad. We want, people in their 30s, 40s. We want different ethnicities to read Mad, but don't change anything. We don't want you to, because we have this huge subscriber base. And if we change anything, they're going to stop subscribing, and we don't want to lose them. So I likened it to being handed a Fabergé egg that's full of silly putty. and I'm told I have to get the silly putty out of the Fabergé egg, but I can't break it. And that's what we did. I mean, we ended up doing it because all the hardcore Mad fans loved it. They loved the new stuff because it had kind of an old Mad vibe. And new fans, like new readers, didn't really know what that was. They didn't know old Mad, but they loved it. So we were actually we broadened the subscriber base, and our sales were doing pretty good.
I love the logo.
Kerry,
You you went back to the original logo more or less and tweaked
kind
it.
of, we sort of modernized it, but that was the inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. I love
I'm gonna show Kerry's story.
And thank you, by the way, Bill. I may have said it before, but I love
which
doing
has
Mad.
Well, I got your check, so you don't need to thank me.
This has a very mad vibe, especially the kind of the punchline ending. So, Kerry, how did you get involved before I was involved or running
Well,
this
I
thing?
just come off doing, there was a big bang comic that Eli was involved with. And I just come off doing some work for that. And also I should mention, most of my career I spent at Hallmark in the licensing department, doing cards and gifts and all sorts of stuff. So I haven't had a big comic career over the last few decades because that's where most of my energies went. But I never quit doing comics. I dabble in them here every once in a while. So when the Big Bang comic came up as a possibility I could contribute to, and again, I think it was because of Super Antics that I got asked. I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'd love to. And then this book with some of the same people involved came along, and I had the opportunity to do it too. And you can see probably in my work that it's heavily influenced by Mad, probably old Marvel comics, old DC comics. I grew up in the country and we didn't really have any art anywhere, any museums or anything. So I had access to comic books occasionally, to Mad magazines, and to the Sunday Funnies. And that was pretty much all the art I saw. So I think it's so ingrained in me that everything I do, it comes out a little bit. It feels like Mad or such. So this was
Maybe I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Eli, maybe you can pull up the Big Bang to show after I stop presenting. You were saying, Kerry.
Oh, I think I said it. It's just that, you'd mentioned the cover. Don looked a little bit like a Mad cover or something with the joke, and that's just so ingrained in me. I didn't.
Well, this was the last thing we added to it was the cover. And I remember driving you crazy, moving around the word balloons, and you didn't seem to mind. You were like, well, that Hallmark, they would,
Well, I've been on both ends. I was an artist Hallmark for half my time there, and then an art director for the other half. So I understand. I think everything that you wanted tweaked, they were just little tweaks that made it a little bit sharper of an image. I'm okay with that. It's just when people start throwing in personal opinions for no reason when they're art directing, just because they're art directing, that I find.
What gave you the idea to use these? And these were all what Alan Moore would call roof runner characters. Alan Moore, when he was working on 1963, he referred to the Fury, which was Steve Bissett's character. He referred to that as a roof runner character. And you took all of my various iterations of Spider-Man and put them all together. What was the idea there?
I was just looking for your stories, and I'm a huge Spider-Man fan myself. So I thought, it'd be fun to do all the characters that seemed inspired by Spider-Man and put them all in one story. So that's what I did. And then
You busted me. I've done. I separated the webs, and I separated the arms, and I separated the. It's I just split them all into different personas.
They're fun characters, though. And then I wanted I read a lot. One of the comics I loved when I was a kid and teenager was the Marvel horror stories, stuff, which I found out as an adult were mostly reprints from Atlas Comics in the 50s. But I loved shock endings or unexpected endings. So every time I do a story, I try to give a little ending to it that maybe you don't see coming. And that's the reason I ended that one the way I did. because hopefully the reader, by the time they get to the last page, is already thinking about Spider-Man in their head. So they're expecting to see Spider-Man on the last page, but they don't. That would be illegal.
Here's Kerry's Big Big Bang, which was the variant front cover, as well as the inside back cover on the A cover. Just again, perfectly. I mean, you said it perfectly. You synthesized those three styles that you started with. And, you know, to me, it's like Golden Age, perfectly Golden Age and Mad and all that.
And then I also had a short story on the inside, which again, kind of read like an old man story, you know.
Well, you have kind of that airbrush kind of Zila, Alex Schomburg kind of style, which I really like. Was Dan in Big Big Bang too?
No,
Milo.
I worked on 1963, but not Big Bang.
Yeah. Yes, an amazing story in Giant Size 63.
That is, yeah.
Oh.
One of my.
I'll be honest. I was a last minute fill-in. They asked Anton Dreck to be here, but he couldn't make it tonight. The legendary. And
this
so
is one of
like,
the.
who can we get? And it's like, what an honor to be asked with these three people here on this part of the screen over here. Just when I think of legendary, like, craftsmen of comedy cartooning, it's like those three things that I love the most. Like, these three guys are masters of making stuff that is literally all ages can enjoy, like a kid can enjoy, an adult can. So I'm just blessed and honored to be part of this project at all. And it was only because I was connected to Eli and through 1963 and worked with the great artist Milo Trent on that. And Don, I don't know why, wrote me in. He reached out. He wanted some extra pages from Milo, and I was happy to shoehorn myself in anywhere with this level of talent.
Well, Dan, the reason, I mean, you had mentioned, of course, you worked with Milo, and it's one of the best. It's a great story from Giant Size 63.
Thank you.
I might actually have the PDF. If not, where was it? What was it called?
In Giant Size 63?
Yeah. What's Dan's story with is it the Micro Man or?
Yeah, into the Fictoverse. I really wanted to do a story with Inframan from 1963 because I felt like he got the we never got to see his character much in the series or enough. And I was like, how typical that is of like a Hank Pym type, like how terrible is it to be like the third smartest guy in the Marvel universe? Like, you can talk to ants, you can grow, you're creating artificial intelligence. You are like, you're playing, but still you're never top rung. So that's why I tried to channel that, and also tried to channel the 50s pre-Marvel origins of like Into the Microverse, which was a story in Shock Suspense Stories or something, one of the EC comics. And I tried to just bring all that together and just tell a little thing. And it was so fun. And then originally I was assigned a new artist who had never done comics before. And I broke him with the wordiness of my story. He's like, I can't do it. They cannot fit this in 5 pages. And he quit. But Milo read it and he's like, I want to try. And man, he knocked it out of the park. He took it and elevated it and made it something. It's a dream come true to be my first published comic and to be of that high quality. He had a great colorist that he brought in. And then I found my friend and a cartoonist, Tony Farrow, who we brought in. He's not a letterer, but I knew he lettered his own stuff and we had similar sensibilities. and he did the letter. Look how dense. Look how too many words.
There it is. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. Of all this giant size 63 pieces, this reminded me the most of reading an Alan Moore story. And
Dan,
just be careful. You don't want to end up like Alan
with
Moore,
that comparison.
but creatively, I mean, and imaginatively, it's just incredible. It's
Thank you. I was trying to ape his tropes. He puts a lot of like real science facts in his stuff. You know, who was the first person? Who was the one to predict? Who knew smoking electronic cigarettes was going to be predicted in The Watchmen? And then to see that come true and to know that was from like scientific research articles in the 80s. So I tried to throw in cold fusion and this and that stuff I have no real clue about. And just make it a classic, fun story.
How did you work with Milo? Because the reason I thought of you for tonight's live stream is, you know, having Kerry on. You and Kerry were quite exercised about the rejection by our crowdfunder, and you were going to take to the airwaves. But I was curious about how you worked with Milo. Being that he is from a country that shall not be named, Iran, how did you? How was the working relationship? Did you write a full script and get thumbnails?
Here's the thing: when we wrote that entire story, I knew he was from another country, but I thought it was Canada. And I was kind of relieved to find out that he was. Frankly, it was like a big relief to find out he wasn't. And I've never really written a comic script before, but I've read a bunch of them, and I knew enough to know that there is no standard way to write a comic, really. So, I knew I was trying to ape EC, so I thought 9-panel grid, and I'm like an engineer, I'm a software guy, so I like did it on like a spreadsheet in like with 9 totally terribly horrible way to write a comic, but he read it and he liked it, and he liked where he could see where it was going, and he just sort of took that as a loose guideline and went Marvel method, which is what I wanted. I said, you are the art director, so you get to decide how it looks. And we did that. And then I did a refinement on the dialogue, and there it was. 5 pages. It was tough to cram in all the stuff I wanted to get in there into 5 pages.
Well, I'm going to show your story in Multimensions. So by this time, you had actually completed the 63 story, and it's going to take me a minute to find which way is the meddler story.
Did you find it was easier this time, Dan, or did you find it was as tough, or change your tactic?
I wrote it like on Facebook Messenger with Dawn and Milo. It was like, we need the 2-page gag. Dan, what do you got?
How many notes did you get on a 2-page gag from Dawn?
Not as many, because we needed it. And then Milo just knew what to do.
Yeah.
And this is a more like a Kerry Callen-ish gag, Mad Magazine punchline type script. And like, I was so dumb. I was like, Dawn, you shouldn't put it on a double-page spread, because you'll give away the punchline. It would be better if you turn the page. But then as soon as I saw it in the PDF, I'm like, nah, it should have just been a double-page spread. It would have been more fun to look at, I think.
All right, I found it.
Yeah, here it is. That's page 1 on the right, and then you got to turn the page to get page 2. Because God forbid you spoil this.
Now we'll look at his. And we got Ted Secor to do the lettering. It worked out really well.
Yeah.
And you're actually in here. Dan Shahin is in the middle of the background of.
There's a couple other gags that Milo slipped in there as well, including a tribute to Ed Piskor I think on the first page. And yeah,
there's
you can see, up there. And there's some other little secret messages in there that Milo put in there.
Is there a picture of me somewhere? Or is that?
There might be.
Let me go to his. I've got a whole page. I don't know if I can.
The Milo well on this one, Don. He's got a sketchbook page in here, it's great.
Yeah,
This was his Yarn Man one pager, and he did a character called Rasta Yarn Man, smoking a sploof. So, and then here's his layouts for the meddler down here. Yeah. So, is this what he showed you? Did you write the script before this?
Yes, I wrote a script. And yeah, Milo, he puts so much into his prelim work. His prelims are tighter than some people's finished work on other books that I've been involved with. So he sweats over every single panel and gag and facial expressions. And really, this is why I felt like he is it's tragic that he can't, get access to the American cartooning market who would love his work.
Agreed.
And his, just to show you his first story, which is way in the beginning somewhere.
And he's a guy he's an interesting fellow. He's more of a graphic designer as a living, which kind of I think shows in his compositions. And we've had interesting conversations about politics, and he has such nuanced views on his own country and our country, and you don't really understand the world until you get out there and start mixing up and see that there is no homogenous other countries. They're all comprised of groups and individuals and everything like our country is. And it was fascinating to talk to him. When Tehran was being bombed, I was talking to him very recently.
Well, that was the fascinating thing. I mean, this is such a wonderful project in so many respects, but I was saying to him, when can you turn in those meddler files? Well, if we survive the night, Israel's dropping bombs on us right now. So I just thought that just put everything in perspective somehow. Yeah. There's hardship and then there's hardship, I guess. But he's from British Columbia originally, and he's lived in Tehran for 30 years. And I didn't think anything of it. When we were putting together our crowdfunding page, and I just I mentioned that all the people, international stars that we have in our we have people from local, we have Pennsylvania, we have Jim Rugg, we have Pittsburgh, we have United States, California, we have UK, Canada, dreaded Canada, and South America, and we have Iran. So I mentioned, we have an artist in Iran, and apparently that got flagged, and there was a holdup for that. But the guy, I mean, I don't know his ethnicity, I don't know his national origin, I don't know his politics. All I know is he loves American cartooning,
and he's really good at it.
And he's fabulous. So
Dan, maybe we need to get him. Maybe us three need to get together and try to do something. Try to figure something out.
I would love to see it happen. I mean, he might come back to Canada. He's talked about it, but again, he has such mixed feelings about it. Like he has friends and family and loved ones there, and Iran is a beautiful country. Like it's a beautiful place to be, with thousands of years of culture and obviously crazy politics, but who are we to talk about crazy politics, in this country or any other country? So it's been just a mind-bending journey to even get to know him and work on this project with him. The one thing he did tell me, though, that he kind of wished maybe that happened is when we first discovered this, and we all kind of rushed to be like, oh man, let's defend him and everything else. If we had a little more patience, we could have talked to him, and he knew the answer to this before we all did. He's like, because he's done work for other countries, and he knows the ins and outs of it and what it would take. But he's so grateful, and he's so happy to be involved in a project. Like the 1963 book was so great, but I felt his was some of the best artwork in that whole book. In this book, he's just a gem amongst sparkling gems on every single page. Don, this book looks so great. I had to buy the limited edition hardcover edition, which was a steal for only $20 more, I think, than the soft cover. It was barely any more. And what an incredible Kickstarter this turned out to be. I believe we're in the 90% funded range. Is that right, Eli?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's 92, 93, Don.
It's 95 at the moment.
Oh,
95.
28.
Operators are standing by right now. You call this, you get the tote bag, the whole thing, if you support this project.
You know what? I've been holding off because I wasn't sure if it was going to be any good. But now that I've seen so many great pages like flashing across my computer screen, like I'm going to go as soon as we're done with this. I'm going to go and back it.
Yeah.
Bill's a late adopter. Well, J.E. Corrales writes, is there going to be a Milo anthology?
That's what I'm asking Dan. I think we should get on it, man.
I hope so, man. Well, you're the publisher, Eli. If you got, I think there's enough Milo work, but then again, we only had the one-time license to publish the 1963 story, so we need a writer.
Get in there and change some colors and some names around, maybe.
We were thinking of doing a reboot of Tyrant, unauthorized with no. I'm just kidding. I don't need to piss off Steve even more. No. Are you kidding me?
No, I mean, I think him and I have talked a little bit, and we're going to try to figure something out. Absolutely, for sure. Talking about the Kickstarter, there's still a lot of original art for sale, and one of the things I'm going to actually add tonight or tomorrow, Christian J. Mizimo just sent me his pages to put up there. He is an absolute demon behind the pen and inks, so you're going to want to check those pages out. And I mean, it's going to be insane. We only have a little bit of time left. So guys, get on it.
In our chat, J. Kevin Carrier says Multimensions really has a murderer's row of talent.
He said
modest. One of them being J. Kevin Carrier, J.E. Corrales, and Misimo.
We got Opterix X-Man right here. That's a good name. He's watching the page anxiously. Me too. I don't know who you are, but that's a great name. Archaeopteryx X-Man. All right. We've got a custom piece. Anything else? I mean, we've got such a murderer's row here. Dan, anything you want to ask anyone? You're another amazing interviewer, man.
Oh, shucks. I've talked to these two mugs a million times. I never got to talk to Kerry. He was on my list for sure of people I wanted to approach. But you know what's funny about Kerry Callen is I rediscovered him multiple times in my life. So I knew him from Directory of a Non-Existent Universe. Like that was a treasured comic of mine. Like as treasured as any other comic I ever had from that era. And I loved it so much. And yeah, it is so funny, guys. Jokes, gags on every single page, and comics too. Like a directory. It's like a directory of the Marvel Universe, and then he does a comic where all of the characters interact, and it's hilarious, top to bottom.
Dang, I'd never seen
Blow that guy up. Blow that guy up.
You know, I need to. I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but
we'll let me spotlight you again. Show it again.
Yeah.
I thought about maybe doing a revised version on Kickstarter or such, because this thing is riddled with typos, which I don't think I delivered documents with typos, but the time it got printed, it was. And originally it was going to be in color, but I was very young and just married and had a kid and a new job, and it took me 2 years to draw this. So by the time I got around to getting it done, there was a big black and white explosion with alternative comics. But thanks to Ninja Turtles, you know how that blew up. And then the market just wasn't there anymore when I got it done 2 years later. So I always felt like it didn't quite get the treatment I wanted. But I don't know if anybody would be interested now.
How many copies did you sell?
I think at the time, I actually think it was like 7,000 or 8,000. Which
it's fully self-published and everything?
No, it was actually through, even though it says ICG on it, it was published by Eclipse.
Oh, wow.
And Eclipse put out index books for, like, you know, Guide to Daredevil or whatever they are. And I thought it would be hilarious if they put that logo on here instead of the Eclipse logo, because this looks like an index book, but it's not.
Gotcha.
And I remember thinking, but that's not as well-known brand, you know. I'd rather have it Eclipse on it.
So I knew him from that. I loved it from that. And then many years later, I owned a comic book store, and I specialized in all ages comics. And I sought out comics that I knew I could sell to kids and I could sell to libraries and schools and teachers. This was back in like 2002 or 2001. And man, Halo and Sprocket became one that was beloved by librarians in the, in the San Jose and South Bay area. And I didn't even realize, it took me years later to figure that out, that was you. And then the Super Dickory, were you involved with do you know what that is? Super Dickory?
The Super, oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
the Super Entries came from a different place, not because of that. It just came from my amusement at people being mean to other people sometimes, which is funny because if people who know me tell me I'm one of the nicest people they know, but there's something about kind of bully humor sometimes that cracks me up.
Well, so that was me rediscovering Kerry Callen Multiply, each time being like, man, these comics are so good.
Well,
and I go, it's that guy again? Like, amazing.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I was just dabbled over the years because I had a good job. I didn't want to mess it up.
Now the non-existent comics, you were drawing on paper at that point. You stopped. You're totally digital now.
Well, I prefer digital because you have so much more freedom. Like when I'm inking, I don't like that line. So you undo it and you ink it again, you know, or obviously things like when you're drawing a person and the head looks great, but it's too big, you know, on paper, you got to erase it and draw it again. But obviously on the computer, you just go, whoop, okay, I made it the right size in about half a second. So I've discovered, though, because I do commissions for people, and a lot of people want physical original art, which I 100% understand, especially since AI is getting into the mix of everything. So the only time I do something on paper is when it's requested for a commission.
But then you could even like print out a blue line of your digital sketch and ink that or something like that,
which is what I do. I lay it out on the
That's
computer.
really good too.
I lay it out on the computer because I have so much freedom to make everything like I want it, you know, and fill in the space and everything. And then you're right, I print it out and then go to the light table, ink it.
Yeah, it's a really nice fusion way to work on stuff.
If you get cartoonists together, eventually they talk about what pen do you use and so forth.
That's true.
But I since we're on the subject, I wanted to ask Bill, because Bill has such a mastery of the brush, and I associate the Simpsons house style with a very uniform kind of almost rapidograph outline. Was there was there more freedom on maybe like Radioactive Man or something, that they had some occasional brushwork or something, or what was
Yeah.
the routine there?
Well, initially, when we started Bongo, the mandate was to make it look like the TV show. So we used a very deadline. We used rapidographs and later microns, but and that applied to Radioactive Man as well. The initial Radioactive Man 6-issue series, and I was the main artist on that, and Steve Vance was the editor. And I was always pestering Steve to let me ink it with a brush so that it would look like a comic book, like the period that we were trying to capture. Because we did a similar thing to 1963 with Radioactive Man. So we did stories that were throughout the history of Radioactive Man from 1952 all the way to 1994. So Steve would generally do layouts, and he would have like lighting effects and things that I just didn't feel like doing that with a rapidograph, like doing that Wally Wood core shadow, with the secondary lighting and all that.
Yeah,
That just seemed to scream brush to me, like it needed brushwork. And Steve said, no, we gotta. I know what you're saying. I feel the same way you do, but we've got to stick to the deadline. But then Steve left after the first year of Bongo, and I became the editor. And I was like, well, I'm going to see what I can get away with. So whenever I did Radioactive Man, I would ink it with a brush, and nobody seemed to care. And in fact, Matt Groening thought it looked great. And where we really experimented was in Treehouse of Horror. And up until the 4th issue, Treehouse of Horror looked like the TV show. And we had guest artists, initially guest writers. So like the first issue, we had Jeff Smith, James Robinson, and Mike Allred, but they were there as writers. So we had like regular Simpsons artists, including me, doing the art. And it all still pretty much had that deadline. Although I did let Mike ink I did the pencils for his story, and then he inked it. So that was like the first time we ever had like the thick and thin brushwork in a Simpsons story.
One of my favorite all-time comic book moments comes from one of those where Jim Mahfood drew Bart dressed as Grendel. That was so amazing.
So I'll get to Jim. So with issue 4, like what I would do is at San Diego Comic-Con, I would walk around and I would talk to artists who I was enamored of. And so I guess it was probably after the 3rd issue, and I was walking around, or the 3rd issue was coming out that October. And so I was trying to recruit people for the 4th issue, and I talked to Jeff Darrow. And I was at Jeff's table, and we were just talking, and he told me what a big Simpsons fan he was. And that was always my cue. Like if I would introduce myself and say, I'm Bill Morrison, I edit the Simpsons comics for Bongo, almost without fail, the response would be, oh my God, I love the Simpsons. And that would be my cue to say, well, would you like to do a Simpsons story? Would you like to do something for Treehouse of Horror? And so I asked that of Jeff, and he was like, oh my God, I would love that time, but maybe I could do a pinup. And I said, that would be great. I said, if you want to do a 1-page or a 2-page, whatever you want to do, we will take it. And Jeff comes from animation. He was an animation professional. And so he is used to working with model sheets. And he said, just send me as many model sheets as you can, and I'll make it look just like the TV show. I'll put everything on model. And in a moment of abandon, I said, you know what, Jeff? I think like your fans are going to want to see how you do The Simpsons. And I'm thinking for a 1 or 2-page pinup, I might get some flack, but if it's off model, I'm not going to worry about it. So So I told Jeff, I said, I'll send you as many model sheets as you want, but I want it to look like you. I want it to be in your style. So he did, and he did this beautiful 2-page spread in issue 4 that shows the aliens, King and Kodos and multiple other, there we go, attacking downtown Springfield. And this is like it's like a 12-page story because there's so much going on all the rooftops and down on the street. So much storytelling here. And when Matt Groening saw this, he came down to my office and he said, we should do more of this. We should have artists in Treehouse of Horror as well as writers and let them do their own style. And he said, the only rules are characters still have to have bulgy eyes and overbites. But other than that, they can do their own thing. I said, great. So then that opened the door. And I think the next issue, we invited Jim Mahfood. And when he turned in his pages, I was like, oh God, I think I made a mistake. Because it was so Jim Mahfood, you know. It was barely Simpson style.
Yeah.
You know.
Loved it.
But everyone loved it. So that gave me the confidence to then just ask anybody. And we did. I'm sorry we never asked Don.
Was Chris Ambar was one of your writers that you worked with?
Chris wrote for us, and he was always pestering me to let him do a Treehouse of Horror story. But he was writing in the Bart Simpson comic, which was more all ages, and it had kind of short stories, 1-pagers, 2-pagers, 5-pagers. So Chris was writing a lot of that, and he kept asking me if he could write a Treehouse of Horror story. And I said, well, Chris, you're one of our regulars now. So no, I can't let you do that because we have to reserve Treehouse of Horror for the guest artists. And he didn't understand that. Like, he kept at me. So one day he called me and he said, if I get Gene Simmons, will you let me write a Treehouse story? And I said, well, Gene's not an artist. So what do you mean? Like, if Gene's going to write, is he going to write it? And Chris said, we're going to write it together. And I said, okay, do you know Gene Simmons? Like, is this a possibility? And he goes, well, I know somebody who knows him. And I went, I'm thinking this is not going to happen. So I went, yes. Okay, Chris, sure. If you can get Gene Simmons, you can write a Treehouse story with Gene. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, I just dismissed it. Like, that's never going to happen. 2 weeks later, Chris calls and he has 2 words, Gene's in. And I said, what do you mean Gene's in? He goes, I just got off the phone with Gene. And wait a minute, you just got off the phone with Gene Simmons. He said, yeah. How did you talk to Gene Simmons? He said, I told you, I knew somebody who knew somebody, and I got his phone number, and he was in a hot tub, so it was hard to hear him, but he's a big Simpsons fan, and I could hear girls giggling in the background, and I'm like, of course you could. And but he said, Gene's in, so we're going to write the story together, and don't worry about it, just carry on. And so now I'm thinking I've got Gene Simmons for the next issue, and then whoever, like, from the comic industry. And I thought that might be kind of weird, kind of unbalanced, because I've got this mega superstar, rock star, and then normal comic book people. And I thought, what if I had like a rock and roll issue? And I started thinking about all the scary, like, horror rock stars. So I'm making a little list. So we got Alice Cooper, Rob Zombie, Ozzy Osbourne, Marilyn Manson. And so I called Chris back and I said, Chris, do you know somebody who knows Alice Cooper? And he said, let me work on it. But if I get Alice, I get to write with him as well. And I said, okay, if you can get Alice, no problem. And a week or so later, he calls me and Alice is in. So now I got Gene Simmons and Alice Cooper. And I'm like, oh crap, this is really happening. So I wasn't able to get Ozzy Osbourne. I got Rob Zombie. And I had enough room for a fourth story. So I'm like, I don't have any way to reach Marilyn Manson, but I had a connection to Pat Boone. And Pat Boone used to be considered a rock star in the 50s. And he had come out with an album called In a Metal Mood. And it was all heavy metal songs done in his like big band swing style. And it's got him on the cover with a leather vest and a motorcycle. And I thought, this is perfect. This is like the perfect punchline to Alice, Gene, and Rob. So I called. There's the cover. So I called Pat Boone's office, and his secretary puts me through to him. And I didn't even know if he'd ever heard of The Simpsons. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of The Simpsons. This sounds like it would be fun." And I actually wrote the story with Pat Boone. So I co-wrote the story with Pat Boone. We got Scott Morris to draw it. I drew the Alice Cooper story because I wasn't going to let someone else get their hands on that. And Rob Zombie had to kind of back out at the last minute because he was working on his next movie after House of a Thousand Corpses. But his idea was House of a Thousand Donuts with Krusty the Clown as the Captain Spaulding character. So he called me and he said, I'm not going to be able to do this. And I said, well, can we go with your idea? Because that was his idea to do that. And we'll put you in as a cameo in the story. So Ty Templeton wrote and drew that one. So that's actually my favorite Treehouse of Horror story. I know that's a long way of answering your question about Chris Yambar, but that was the tenacity of Chris. Like he was a dog with a bone. He would not let it go until he got to write a Treehouse story, and he ended up writing 2.
Is it true that they mixed in some of Gene Simmons' blood in the print run of that comic? That's the scuttlebutt. Not
ours, but in the Marvel magazine.
The bongo was Pat Boone's blood, I thought.
Yeah, that's right. It was all 4 members of KISS. They all flew to, I think, Sparta, Illinois, where the KISS magazine that Marvel did was being printed, and they all pricked their fingers and dropped blood into the ink.
I never believed they really would go to, just because I didn't believe they would go to Sparta to do anything.
Well, Gene's a big comics fan. I actually had a meeting in his office. He wanted to, this was after he did the Treehouse story, and he wanted to do a Kiss Bongo or Kiss Simpsons crossover. So I got to go to his mansion and have a meeting in his office, his home office. And he's got a spinner rack with all kinds of cool comics. And I mean, we talked mostly comics for about a half hour.
Well,
I just need everyone to look up the Pat Boone. Sorry, Don, real quick. The Pat Boone album. The track list is insane.
Yeah.
And it's everything from Smoke on the Water to Panama, Enter Sandman, Crazy Train, The Wind Cries Mary, Stairway to Heaven. Insane. It's on YouTube.
And if you want to hear big band versions of those songs, it's a really good album.
Precursor to Dick or Richard Cheese, if you ever heard of him.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, Don. A little side music.
I just was tying it back to.
Let's see it.
We got permission from Chris's widow Maureen to. Do you remember when Chris was working on Mr. Beat?
Yeah. I met Chris in the early days of Bongo because he called Fox. Oh yeah, there's Mr. Beat. He called Fox to try to get Matt Groening to come out to a store in Youngstown, Ohio that he was managing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and he had like a store / art gallery. So this speaks a lot about Chris. He was such a showman, and he had a limo pick me up at the airport. Matt couldn't do it, so the Fox publicity person said, "Well, Bill Morrison, draws the comics. We could probably get Bill Morrison to come to your store." So that was arranged. Chris flew me into Youngstown, and this limousine picks me up with this limo driver wearing a classic Cato style limousine uniform. And she picks me up, takes me to my hotel. She says, "I'll be back at, like 9 a.m. to pick you up." So she takes me to the store, and we just sit there outside the store in the limousine. And a few minutes later, Chris gets in, and he introduces himself. The first time I met him. And so we're talking, and I said, so Chris, why are we sitting here? Like, why aren't we going into the store? And he goes, "Well, you see that line of people outside the store? Well, they're going to see this limo. They're looking at this limo right now, and they're going, who is in that limo? Why is there a limo, like a slick black classic limousine here?" And they're going to start calling their friends, because they're going to think this is like a really big deal. Like there's somebody famous enough to be in a limousine coming to the store. And that was when I realized, it's like, oh my God, this guy's a genius. like in terms of marketing, he just thought, I mean, that, the cliche thinking outside the box, he thought outside like a factory, a box factory. And then that's how we became friends. We became friends after that. So, and then when we started the Bart Simpson title, I thought Chris is perfect to write stories for that. So it was at that point that we kind of started working on the Simpsons together. Although I had done some Mr. Beat. I did a Mr. Beat thing with my Roswell character, like a crossover. So we did a lot of things over the years.
Wow. Yeah, I met him when he was in retail, and it was in Youngstown.
Yeah.
And he had Mike Cazala as a guest.
Yeah, that was around the same time, because Mike was doing the Ren and Stimpy comic.
And he was doing, it was called Substance Comics. It was
Yes.
his answer to Image Comics.
Bill, did you just do a Zoop as well for your Roswell character?
Yes, I did.
Is that still up and going, or?
It was fully funded, and the book was pretty much ready. It's a collection of everything, every Roswell story to date, and I was so happy that it got funded so quickly that I wanted to like kind of expand it. So I've taken a little extra time to get some pinups. So I've got I just got a pinup from Sergio Aragones that's being colored right now, and I got one from Mark Schultz, and Scott Shaw did one. So I've got a number of pinups that are going to kind of pad out the book.
Beautiful.
And based on the success of that, I'm now, once that book is delivered into the hands of all the backers, I'm gonna do a crowdfunding for a new ongoing series.
Awesome.
So yeah, I am bringing it back, but I wasn't sure if the audience was there, but it seems like it is. So, so this Kickstarter, or not Kickstarter, but Zoop crowdfunding campaign sort of gave me the energy to do that.
It's awesome. They say Roswell that ends well.
That's right.
The multi-layer joke there, because
that was the name of the Futurama episode where
Classic
they go back to Roswell. Yeah.
Was that one a riff on the Deep Space Nine episode where Quark goes back to Roswell? I was always like, why are we even talking about this?
It could be. Yeah, there could be some elements of that. That was written by I'm blanking on his name now. Doesn't matter. But
classic.
All those Futurama writers are geniuses.
Yeah.
We had a staff of like a dozen writers, and I know at least 8 of them had doctorates in different areas, you know.
Was that pressure on the comic writers of that? They're like, oh God, are we doctors?
I don't know. I mean, Ian Boothby was one of our main writers for Futurama, and Eric Rogers, but Eric was a writing assistant on the show.
Oh, perfect.
And so he was always pitching ideas to the show, and eventually some of his ideas got greenlit and he scripted those. But because he had so many good ideas, I mean, Patrick Verone was one of our writers, and he was a staff writer on the show. But they would pitch ideas that were really good ideas, but they just didn't have enough episodes to do all the great story pitches that the writers had. So Patrick would turn some of his rejected story ideas into comic scripts.
That's good to know there was that much synergy with that. I was wondering.
There was, not as much with The Simpsons, but
yeah,
I think with Futurama, because I was art director on the show and I knew all the writers, it was a lot easier to make that happen.
Nice.
Watching Futurama, or it might have been The Simpsons, I can't remember, but I realized what my favorite form of entertainment is because of those shows. And that is shallow entertainment by intelligent people.
Yeah, geniuses that are slumming, right?
Well, not slumming, just being smart, but making it all shallow for us,
But then they can write those jokes that work on like this level. But then if you know a little more.
Right. There's so many intelligent things in Simpsons and Futurama,
When Matt made his deal for Futurama, they said, we're going to put you up in, we'll give you a whole floor on this building that we have. That was actually the Fox Sports building in Los Angeles. But Futurama had a whole floor, and Matt said, I want to have Bongo there with me so I don't have to drive across town every time I need to meet with the Bongo people.
Nice.
So I had worked on development for the show. And then once Matt pitched it and Fox bought it, I went back to just, continuing to do my Bongo stuff. But now I found myself on the same floor with everybody from Futurama, the producers, casting directors, writers. And they knew that I had done all this development work. So they kept coming to me for free artwork. Like if the animation studio wasn't getting something, or if they were just overwhelmed and needed extra help, they would come down to my office. That's how I became art director, because I went to the producers one day and I said, look, I'm really enjoying this experience of working on the show, but I think I should really be working on the show.
Yeah.
And getting paid and everything. So they agreed, and they put me on staff. So at that point I was doing double duty, Bongo and Futurama. But one day I was walking down the hall, and a couple of writers were coming the other way. And this is when we were just still working on the pilot. And I said hi, I was very friendly, and, they didn't know who I was. I didn't think, but I knew who they were. And I was like, hey guys, how's it going? And they just grunted at me. They was like, ugh. And they looked just beaten down and tired. And I thought, there's no way in hell this show is going to be funny with writers like this. These are the most humorless people I've ever met. And then I found out they were just working really long hours, and they were just exhausted. And they ended up, being hilarious. But
well, before we move back into Megaton, I do want to say that if it wasn't for Futurama, my first date with my now partner of 15 years was to watch the first episode when it came back on the air. So Futurama is very special in my relationship.
And can I say, Simpsons comics and Futurama comics are about like 10 times better than they needed to be, probably, to be successful in the market. Like, they were so good just as comics unto themselves. If there was no Simpsons show, the comics were so incredible. Like,
Well,
super
thank
high
you.
quality.
My that was always my goal, was to make the comics seem like the show as much as possible. And sometimes at conventions, people would come up to me and they would start telling me about their favorite comic episode or comic issue. And I would realize they're actually talking about an episode of the show, but they got it confused. Like, they didn't realize that what they were telling me was an episode they watched, not a comic they read. And that was the best for me. It was like, okay, if I can create something that's that seamless, and I don't mean me creating, but with my writers and artists, that's the goal. That was the goal. We should talk about Megaton Man and Radioactive Man, because that's a missed opportunity. Like, how that crossover never happened, I have no idea.
Well,
What
first,
can we do to get that going? Go ahead, Don.
well, first, I want to tell my Simpson story. You probably heard this before, but I've mentioned Mike Cazala a couple of times. We were roommates in Detroit. We went to junior high school and high school together. And he went out to LA and he started working for, and he ended.
You there, Don?
And Crick Lucy. Sorry about that. I went into the multi-mentions.
Okay.
So Mike went out to LA. We were talking on the phone. He goes, "Yeah," he says, Matt Groening's got this thing called The Simpsons, and it's going to be like little segments on the Tracy Ullman show." And I don't think I ever saw it, but 9 o'clock every Sunday night, as soon as the Tracy Ullman show went off the air, my phone would ring. And there would be a couple middle school girls saying, "Is Bart there?" and laugh hysterically and hang up. And I want you to know, Bill, that this prejudiced me for several decades. It took. But let's talk about the Radioactive Man.
Wow, that's amazing.
You had this. No, that's a true story. So you had an idea for Radioactive Man and Megaton Man. I don't remember. This would have been the early 90s. And I think I was hanging around with Jason Grode.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was a high-powered attorney for Matt and for everybody that had a prospective animation deal. And I had one for like 30 seconds. And I faxed it to her, and she wrote all over it and faxed it back and said, "I can't let you sign this deal. Here's a bill for $3,300. Anyway,
that sounds about right.
But you pitched me. You said, "Hey, let's talk to Matt about a team up." And we were, I don't know, it was some evening. We were in San Diego, and we go find him.
Yeah.
It was just after the awards banquet or something, and we found him, and I had the stupid timing of walking up to Matt after he had won an award and given a speech and everything else, and I said, "Hey, Bill's talking about a team up." And he looked at me like I had three heads, and I figured, well, that's probably not going to happen now, so.
Maybe he just didn't understand what we were talking about. But who did this?
You got to hit these guys at the right time, I guess.
Wow.
I think this guy makes these like mashups on his Facebook or YouTube or Facebook.
Yeah,
Super
yeah.
Team.
Yeah. Okay, I've
Yeah,
seen
okay, yeah.
these.
Yeah.
So that
It's
drawing
funny.
of Radioactive Man is actually drawn. It's inked by me, but it's drawn by the great Dan DiCarlo.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
classic Archie artist, huh?
Yeah.
Archist. Well, sweet.
But I don't
Nice.
know. I still want to see that happen someday. I'm holding out hope.
That'd be amazing. Who do we need to talk to? Bill Morrison.
Basically Matt. I mean, Matt
Yeah.
owns all the publishing rights. So, I mean, I talk to him regularly. So I can definitely pitch it if there's interest. And,
That'd be awesome.
Bongo doesn't exist. So we would have to, it would have to be, I don't know. He's got a company now called Bapper Books, which publishes the Disenchantment comics. So maybe it would be a joint publication with your company, Don. And
I'm ready.
That'd be
I'm
sweet.
sharpening my pencils
all right.
right now.
I'll send him a copy of Multimensions when it comes out.
That'd
be awesome.
And I mean, from everything I've seen, I know Matt would love it. Do any of you know who Sammy Harcum is?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Kramer's Ergot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Matt came to me one day, and he had been to a party where he met Sammy, and he said, so he said, I don't know if you've seen this Kramer's Ergot, but Sammy Harcum publishes it, and he pitched me the idea at this party last night to let him guest edit an issue of Treehouse of Horror. So Matt wanted to know if I was okay with that. And I said, yeah, that would be amazing. Sure. I'll give him everything he needs. And so Sammy guest edited issue 15, and it's the weirdest, most underground Simpsons comic you've ever seen. It'll blow your mind. But that's the kind of thing Matt loves. He loves like different artists. Like I said, with Treehouse of Horror, when we started letting artists do their own style, he thought that was great. So I think if he sees Multimensions, I think he might be all over that idea.
And that predates what they did on The Simpsons, where now they've had different animation directors directing the couch segment.
The couch bags, yeah.
That's really cool. He just did that thing out here with Art Spiegelman and Dan Nadell. That was amazing to see.
Yeah, he was supposed to interview Robert Crumb.
Right.
I guess that fell through, but then instead he interviewed Art talking about Crumb, right?
Yeah, which was still pretty amazing. Yeah, it was very cool to see. And he took that time too to be like, I'm reading these independent comics that you've never heard of. So check these out. And yeah, that was really cool.
That's one of his favorite things at Comic-Con in San Diego is he'll just take a couple hours to walk through Artist Alley, and he'll buy stuff off of people's tables that that he likes, and just encourage young people, because that's how he started.
Yeah.
At San Diego, he had his little Kinko's printed Life in Hell comics.
Well, that's when I met him in the early 80s. He had his square first two Life in Hell. I used to see him in the Village Voice and stuff, and that's how I got to know him.
Now, the way I don't want to make this stray too far from the topic, but I met Matt in the 80s when I was working in movie advertising, and he used to write the taglines for some of the posters that we worked on. So this predates The Simpsons, and he was just doing everything, just doing multiple things to make ends meet. And so our first collaboration together, first time I did the art and Matt wrote the copy, was for the poster for Blood Diner, 80s horror movie. And the copy he wrote was, first they greet you, then they eat you. So if you look that up, if you look up the Blood Diner poster, you'll see Matt, you'll see my artwork, and you'll see Matt's tagline.
Wow.
There it is. Yeah.
You calling it up, Eli?
Yeah, I got you. First they greet you, and then they eat you. Yeah, I was just over at Stuart Eng Books here in town, and they have a bunch of classic Life in Hell, so I almost picked them up. There you go.
Cool. Yep, there it is.
That explains, like, that's like when he would do his Akbar and Jeff ones. Those were very like, he would do the advertisements. It was like ad copy, little snappy slogans. Those were my favorites.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a sad day when he decided to give up life in hell.
Yeah.
It went on a lot longer, I think, than I expected it to, or most people expected it to, though. I think he was well into his Simpsons fame when he decided to let that go.
Oh yeah. He had an office at Bongo, and he would come in every Thursday. I mean, he would come in other days, but Thursday was like his dedicated life in hell day. So he would sometimes in the morning, if he had some stuff to do on The Simpsons, he would do it. But then he would come in and he would just bang out his weekly strip.
That's awesome. When did it end, actually?
Oh, I forget the year.
Yeah.
I mean, sometime maybe in the mid 2010s.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Or it might have been into the teens. I'm not sure.
And it became much more like autobiographical about himself and his kids and stuff, as I recall. I didn't have it in a weekly around me, but whenever I would read it, it would be like stuff about his kids.
Yeah, he used to feature Will and Abe, and he actually did. He did enough of those strips that he did a Will and Abe book collection, and he would mostly just like write down stuff they would say, like conversations they would have. He would just sit there and eavesdrop, and then he would do the strip. If he found it amusing, he would just make it into a strip.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So,
well, none of this has been off topic. This all keeps circling around. This is the amazing thing about this project, and just I'm always learning these new connections. And
2012, Brandon says, "Hi, Brandon."
2012.
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of a life in hell, these last 9 days are going to be a life in hell if we don't get the Kickstarter backed.
Hey-o.
Nice segue. That deserves a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
I will say, Don, you criminally underpriced the signed hardcover. That's why it sold like hotcakes.
Well, if you put some low and you sell more of it, sometimes you make more money.
Yeah,
but
maybe so.
That was the publisher. That was the publisher's decision. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah, it was. We're trying here. We got a lot of things. I think the thing is now is for all the people to buckle down on the original art. That cover is still out there. I'm going to put Measy Mo's pages up. And there's, Joe asked a question up here. Someone was asking about here we go. Question that a friend asked, does the custom piece in the add-ons by Don include maybe a cover gig, or is this only your characters? Like, would you do someone else's characters?
Sure.
There you go.
Let's
Joe,
talk.
tell them back the 11 by 17 size, and then we'll work it out from there. Great.
Maybe
Perfect.
the elusive Spider-Man.
Oh,
Blue Web.
Spider-Man versus the Blue Web.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks, first of all, for being involved in the project and letting me exploit your name and drop your names and cash in on your celebrity. But also,
You're welcome.
And thank you
thanks for being here tonight. And
Yeah.
wow, this has been great. So
Thank you all.
this is
so
one
much.
for the time capsules. This is one of our better videos. So
Yeah, is there an award for podcast? Because I think we should submit this.
I think there is. The Webbies, the Casties, I think.
Okay. This should definitely be submitted and considered.
Definitely.
historical.
The Marin Award for longest intro we could add.
Want to see
Awesome.
my cat before we go?
Of course we do.
Yeah.
Oh, he came up really wanting to be pet, but finally just laid down behind me and gave up.
What's their name?
Parsnip.
Parsnip. How's it going, bud?
I wanted the original Anton Drek J.E. Corrales is asking about Anton Dreck. We needed, if that was a backer bonus, you could have gone big time, Don.
I'm not familiar with that name.
Before we do go, maybe we can get a round of plugs going on. So if you guys have anything going on you want people to check out, Dan, you want to start there?
Well,
when's your show coming back?
I hope to do more comics again soon. This is a life-fulfilling dream to be involved in comics in any way, and to be in a project with people as talented as these. That's like my life ambitions are fulfilled as far as making comics. So nice. Thank you so much.
Word. And definitely check out your YouTube channel where you've got a backlog of tons of great interviews.
There's new stuff coming soon. When Ed passed away, I lost a lot of passion for talking about comics on YouTube. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I hear you.
It did. I received the email the morning that it happened, and because he had been on my show too, and it took all the wind out of my sails for this thing. But it's coming back. It took over a year, but it's coming back.
Good, man. I'm excited. Sweet. And what's the channel called? It's just your name? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Nah, these days I changed the name to Jugglenautics, and I do juggling videos, and I do all just whatever to get my mind off of what's going on.
Okay, cool.
I can
juggle. And I want to,
I can juggle too.
Nice.
Really? Not a common thing. Anyone else?
I'm pretty good at juggling podcast guests. Kerry, on to you.
I keep dropping my eraser and having to pick it up, and that's all I do. I lose my art supplies.
Thanks so much, Dan. Oh yeah.
I'm penciling the Megaton mice for no apparent reason at all.
Huh.
But that's it. That's all.
All right.
More of the same, basically.
What about you, Kerry?
I've actually recently done more work for MAD, which we'll see print, I guess, in the summer.
Nice.
Am I supposed to say that? I don't even know anymore.
Yeah, I think you can.
So I'll have some stuff coming up in an issue soon, and then I actually keep pretty busy just doing commissions for people, but I kind of had the itch, like working on your project, Don, and working on the Big Bane stuff, is just to go back and do some more of my own comics with some of my own creations. So awesome. I just need to figure out exactly what I want to do. I don't know if you guys get haunted by this, but sometimes I just get more ideas, and depending on the day, this idea sounds great. And then the next day it's like, no, this idea sounds better. And then it's like, I just need to focus on one and just do it. Definitely. It used to bother me, but I thought, and you guys probably have the same problem, but it used to bother me. I thought of more things that I thought I could get to, but that's better than the opposite problem, I guess.
Yeah.
And like I said, the blue web, I started drawing this up in.
Oh no!
Freeze.
It was a slow afternoon, so I started drawing that.
Where was that?
Up in Dearborn.
Oh, at the Marty show. Yeah, that was slow.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, what about you, Bill?
Slow afternoon. So.
Well, Kerry and I are both weekly featured columnists on a website called 13th Dimension. Kerry does a Sunday feature every week that's really hilarious. Sometimes it's commissions, I think, Kerry, sometimes original brand new stuff. And so it's called Sunday Funnies. And then I follow him the next day with Morrison Mondays. And I do, just a variety of things. Sometimes it's showing old homages that I've done, swipes. And sometimes it's brand new stuff. If there's an anniversary in comics, sometimes we'll do like a tribute to somebody. So I'd like to plug that. And And if you are a toy collector, I did the packaging art for the new Simpsons King Homer 16-inch plush doll. So it's wraparound box art, and it's up for an award at the National Cartoonist Society Rubens. So it's up for the divisional award for best advertising or package design.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Nice, man.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Anyway, you can get that at Walmart. They're pretty cool. They're probably going to sell out, but the doll itself is amazing. It looks just like the King Kong Homer from the Treehouse of Horror episode. It's all black and white. And awesome. Jack Specific is the company that's got the toy license now for The Simpsons, and they did like a screen faithful evil Krusty doll from.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually got the switch on the back where you can switch it from good to evil.
Yeah.
And when you switch
I'm happy.
when you switch it to evil and pull the string, it only says the evil stuff.
That's
and
awesome.
if you switch it to good, it only says the good lines.
Yeah, that's very funny.
So they're like knocking it out of the park just in being faithful and like getting the property. A lot of toy licensees don't really understand what they have.
Yeah.
And Jax is really doing a great job.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you guys all so much. Don't forget to get out there and back the Kickstarter. Type in this random assortment of letters and numbers and you'll get there, or just search Kickstarter.
I'm going to do it tonight. I promise.
All right. Yes. Get out there and tell your local shops as well. We have a retailer tier. And we also have, a ton of original art, a ton of amazing places. As Dan said, a drastically underpriced signed hardcover. So get in now while you can, because aftermarket will be crazy. All right, guys. Thank you so much from all of us here at the Megaton Multimensions. Stay multi.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll end it with my brand new animated outro. All right.